Hi, I'm Katy Kramer, President and CEO of the Boettcher Foundation. Welcome to Colorado Leadership Stories, where we talk to everyday, courageous leaders who have made transformational impacts in their communities and are building a better state for everyone. You'll hear from leaders and organizations and communities throughout the state as we explore the idea that leadership is an activity that anyone can do. Katy Anthes is a longtime leader in Colorado's education sector, having served as our state's Commissioner of Education from 2016 to 2023. As Colorado's first female commissioner in 65 years, she is widely respected for her ability to foster collaboration and consensus building among diverse communities and viewpoints. Currently, Katy leads the Forward Initiative at the Public Education and Business Coalition, focusing on reducing polarization and promoting conflict resolution in education. Recently, Katy was awarded a Colorado Governor's Citizenship Medal for her community leadership in the public sector. Welcome, Katy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Katy. Love being here.
Oh, the Katy and Katy
It's
show
the Katy
today.
team.
That's right. I love it. Great. We'll dive in and want to start a little bit with the origin story, your Katy origin story. Let's talk about growing up. What experiences or family influences shaped your passion for education and public service?
Yeah. Well, I am the daughter of a librarian. My mother was a librarian and my father's a scientist. And so, lots of education in our family and always just, I think, an ethos of we were very lucky. We're a very privileged family. And when you have that privilege, you serve others. Mm-hmm. And you serve others either through discovering new scientific, research or serving others in the library or whatever. And so I had always had that ethos and had been interested in all sorts of things like environmental science and poverty issues. How do we eradicate poverty, civil rights issues? And then as I went through college, I realized the core of all of those issues, if we work on the proactive side of those issues, that would mean working on education. Mm-hmm. Because if we can have a high quality education for all, then all of those other things start to take care of themselves. If people can be educated, they are much less likely to be in poverty. They are much more likely to respect diverse opinions. They are much more likely to respect our earth and the environment. So I said, well, I want to work on the proactive side of those issues. So that's how I got into public education.
Well, we definitely share that theme of being passionate about education and seeing that value. So certainly your parents were early influencers, but knowing the power of educators, do you have a teacher or a mentor that comes to mind when you think in those early years that maybe inspired you too?
Yeah, I did. My English teacher, Mr. Randy Rothberg, Fairview High School in Boulder. So I think that he's no longer a teacher, but we did connect when I became commissioner and it was super fun. We went to lunch. So who knows if he'll hear this podcast, but he was a big influence. First of all, because he had really high expectations. I wanted to get into his class and he didn't let me into his class to begin with because it was like an honors English class. And I was like, no, I'm going to work really, really hard. I promise. And I had to rewrite my papers 10 times. But I kept doing it. I kept at it. So I credit him with actually teaching me to become a good writer. And he ran a whole volunteer system in the school where he got high schoolers involved in all sorts of things to support the community. So he influenced me both from high expectations in schoolwork and contributing back to the community is an important part of our world.
Love that. Power of teachers, always. But you grew up early years in Pennsylvania, and I've heard you describe yourself as a Colorado girl. So I did not realize you graduated from Fairview High School. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so then take us, let's go to the story there. Talk about the career path. Like what happens? Where'd you go to college? And then how did you find yourself into education?
Yeah, I always tell Rob Anderson, the current superintendent in Boulder Valley Schools, I'm like, I'm a product of your school system because I went to Mesa Elementary, Southern Hills Junior High, and Fairview High School. So really grew up in Colorado, grew up in Boulder, went to college at the University of Oregon. And, that was a wonderful experience. It's a very volunteer service-oriented campus. So I got involved in lots of things there. And I actually wasn't sure. I mean, I graduated with a degree in anthropology and a minor in biology. I thought maybe.
Oh.
So I didn't go into public education right out of college.
Okay.
So I had kind of, come around to that more in my graduate school. So I wanted to come back to Colorado because I am a Colorado girl at heart and just love Colorado. So I came back here and started getting my master's degree at CU Denver in public affairs. And that's when I sort of got the bug for education. In public affairs, I was thinking about all of these different public sector issue areas. And I was like, education is the one that impacts all the others.
Right.
So that's why I went there. And so got an internship at the Education Commission of the States, which is a national organization headquartered here in Denver. And that's what started my career in education. So I kind of came at education from a different view. Like I was not a K through 12 teacher, or a principal or a superintendent. I came into K through 12 education as a policy person and as a researcher. And ended up the Colorado Department of Education, once I left ECS, ended up becoming a client of mine. I ended up running a lot of task forces. So, the legislature always passes these task forces that usually the Department of Education has to run related to education. And they needed neutral facilitators to help run those task forces. And because I had a lot of experience in working with policymakers and crafting policy at the Education Commission of the States, I got hired to run a lot of those task forces. So that's how I got connected to the Colorado Department of Education. And then another really long story, after several years, became commissioner.
Well, you teased us there. But, that's a pretty amazing trajectory to start at Education Commission of the States and the policy piece. And then you're ending up, you've done all these things sort of systemically, right, for the state. Yeah. But how'd you get prepared for the role of commissioner?
Well, I kind of laugh because I don't think anything really prepares you for that role.
Okay.
And the situation, how I got the role was not exactly expected, let's say that. So I did come to CDE. I was recruited to CDE to run the Educator Effectiveness Division.
Okay.
And so I was the Executive Director of Educator Effectiveness. Then I got several other roles over time, like Associate Commissioner for Strategy and Academic Achievement, and then was Chief of Staff for a short time. And during that time, there was some turnover and there was some transitions of commissioners. So we had like 3 different commissioners in 12 months or 16 months or something. And the last commissioner right before me didn't work out. And so the board chair called me one day, and I was chief of staff at the time, and said, we need you to step into this role. And that was quite a shock to me because I had never envisioned myself in that role. I had never actively prepared myself for that role. And actually I credit him because I was like, I think I probably poo-pooed it a little bit. No, you don't want me. I shouldn't do it. And the board chair at the time was like, I think you can do it. You're probably doing it now. You're essentially, through all these transitions, you're keeping the trains moving on time.
Right.
And so, he really gave me some confidence and said, no, you can do it and we need you to do it. And, we had sort of a trial period and kind of an interview period. And then after that, 7 years later, was still commissioner.
Well, and I think during some very interesting times, Katy, I know that you were commissioner during COVID, and I think that you were very successful in that role, certainly from where we sit here at the Boettcher Foundation and just seeing you in action in the community. And so knowing that this is the Colorado Leadership Stories podcast, I think just ask you to reflect on what leadership skills, characteristic attributes do you think made you successful?
Yeah. Well, it was, I say, probably my highest value as a leader and my highest sort of belief is responsiveness.
Mm.
So it's that if somebody asks a question or if somebody engages with the Colorado Department of Education or with whatever organization you're running, be responsive. Don't ignore them, respond back. And I use that because even if I don't know the answer, which oftentimes I don't, I mean, we're only human. We can only know so many answers. But I made a pledge that under my leadership, CDE was not going to be the black box of bureaucracy. If somebody emailed CDE, we would get back to them. Even if we had to say, I don't know the answer right now, I'm going to do some research and I'll get back to you within a couple days or something like that. So that value served me really well. I can't tell you how many times people were like, oh my gosh, you responded to my email, or oh my gosh, you called me back, I had the same look you did on that. I was like, this is like a very low bar, but it's a bar that a lot of folks aren't meeting right now. And so especially during COVID, I had hundreds of emails from people who were scared, uncertain,
Right.
parents who had kids in school, and I promised I would get back to all those people. And even if I didn't have the answer, or even if I had to tell them something they didn't want to hear, I would get back to them. And I think that was a really important thing to do during an uncertain time. And sometimes it was me just commiserating with them.
Of course.
Like
It was scary.
I don't know the answers.
Right.
I'm not a healthcare professional. I don't know how bad this is. I don't know how bad it's going to get. I hear your fear. I'm fearful too. We're going to take conservative measures in partnership with the governor and others. And I know not everybody will like those conservative measures requiring masking, the closure of schools. But at the time, we did not know how hard, we did not know all the things about the virus. And so we did not know how dangerous it was. And it was very dangerous. So responsiveness is my number one leadership thing that I try to lean into all the time.
Well, that's great. And I think that kind of connects to what you're doing now. And take us there. You are working on something so timely and significant, and we're all grateful for it. But talk about the Forward Initiative. What's your vision? Why? Yeah. What's your why behind it, which is clear. But please tell us about that story, about why you're doing this and why now.
Yeah. As commissioner, as I kind of alluded to in the story, so Colorado has a slightly different governance structure than most states in education. The commissioner is appointed by a politically elected state board of education. In many states, the commissioner is appointed by the governor or is appointed by an appointed board, which means that there tends to be more alignment between the politics of the state. But when in Colorado, and there are 5 other states that have a similar structure, it means that you can get very diverse opinions in terms of who your boss is. And I had that, right? So when I started being the commissioner, the Colorado Board of Education was Republican majority, Democrat minority. When I left the commissioner, it was Democratic majority, Republican minority. So I had to work all 7 years through all of those different viewpoints, right? And when I started, I think there was some, I think the board would agree with me, there was some division within the board and the vision and how they were working together, hence the turnover of commissioners. So I knew that was one of my top priorities coming into the commissionership. How do I bring the board together? How do we work together? And let me say, this is not about avoiding conflict. Conflict is an important part of our democracy. It's an important part of organizations. It's an important part of policy development because you need all those different opinions to figure out the best way forward. But it was about how do we have conflict respectfully, right? How do we get ideas on the table? How do we take those ideas? How do we compromise when needed? How do we find where our common ground is and move forward? So all through my years of commissioner, I was doing that work. When I decided to step down, and I was reflecting on my role and what I saw across the country and what I saw in the state, I was like, wow, we really need some we really need to lean into these skills on how to manage polarization, how to decrease polarization, and how to keep conflict in the good conflict realm, not in the destructive conflict realm. And so this became a passion area of mine, because I actually think I had some natural skills around it.
Right.
And so I dove into all the research around it and what are the things. And I was like, these are things we know. They're things we can learn, and they're things we can get better at. If I can help at least people in the education community, leaders in the education community, superintendents, school boards, others, teachers now, everybody's facing conflict and polarization. If I can help them, then I think we're going to be able to focus on student outcomes more. Rather than get distracted by all of the ideological this, that, or the other thing. So that's why I started Forward, from polarization to progress. And I say to progress because there's no like silver bullet to this.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to make progress.
Right. It's not
steps.
Polarization to solution. Right. It's to progress.
It's like, how do we listen to people we disagree with? How do we listen, when your values are being challenged? How do we dig into that? How do we have curiosity? How do we do that? And those are skills you actually have to practice. And I think we've gotten away from practicing them. Now bipartisanship is a dirty word. Now compromise is a dirty word. So I'm sort of leaning back into those old concepts because I feel like we've gotten too far away from them, and it's preventing progress on issues of the public good.
That's great. Well, gosh, I just want to ask you all the questions about this, but I do want to ask you one in particular, which is, Katy, what are some of those skills that make the most difference, that we need to practice, that we need to teach everybody?
Yeah. And I say this in all of my workshops and in all the coaching I do. Nothing I will say will surprise you. None of this is new. It's like we know it, and we just shy away from it in this moment of polarization. So I would say I have 5 skills that we work on in workshops together, but I say the 2 most important ones for this purpose is curiosity and the ability to rethink things. So sometimes people will call that having an open mind. But I think in this moment we have gotten we make too many assumptions about too many people. And it tends to fall along the lines of politics right now. And there's lots of research to show we've gotten much more ideological and much more sort of, David Brooks calls it tribal. And because of that, we make a bunch of assumptions about the other people.
Sure.
The people who are not in our political party, the people who are not. And what I find is having curiosity about that and not making those assumptions, digging into those assumptions, you will learn an enormous amount of about people who you think why they're doing what they're doing. But I had to do this in my real world as commissioner. Like, I had to work with people all on different political perspectives. And so I had to be curious. Tell me why you care about this. Tell me why this is important to you. So curiosity, and then rethinking. And rethinking is about, can you really honestly see the issues you're working on from another perspective? In education, we hear a lot about book banning right now. Well, can you understand why some parents may be concerned about certain types of books being available or not knowing their child is reading these books? Can you understand the other side of that? People being scared of not having the availability of books and different topics. And can you dig into that and actually have some curiosity about what that may be?
Right.
If you can do that, number one, you find out that you're not as far apart as you think you are.
Right.
When you really ask good questions and you're authentic about it. And number two, you can usually find a third way. You can find a way that's not either we ban the books or we don't ban the books. There's probably lots of options in between there. And can we explore those? Those are the 2 I think are most important to lean into right now. The other ones just to...
Because you have to tell them, because I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Listening. And, people roll their eyes. I know I have to listen, but we're really bad at it. So we have to practice it.
Right.
Like listening, looping, and actually making sure you heard the person. So listening, curiosity, complexity is another one. We get more and more polarized the more and more we simplify issues. And so part of what we have to do to shirk away from polarization is help people understand the complexity of issues, and that it's not just black or white, right or wrong, evil or good. It's like there's lots of nuance in between there. So showing the complexity, listening, rethinking, having curiosity. And then the last one is actually creating space. And that's, I talk about, the research kind of shows, some polls and stuff show that 87% of the public don't want to be as polarized as we are. They want to find common ground. But what I say is that sometimes that 13%, sometimes they will show up at your board meeting. Sometimes they are trying to fan the flames of fear. Sometimes. And so in those moments, you have to figure out a way, if you're a leader, to create space from that.
Right.
And to kind of either disengage or de-escalate or, breathe. So creating space is actually a skill leaders need in this time of polarization.
Wow. Well, and I know that your work is focused mostly with educators, right, initially. But how do you see, what's your vision for going forward? Are there other sectors you're thinking to work in, or other communities, or?
I mean, it's completely transferable to
everything, right?
So I did the Civico Purpose Hour a couple of weeks ago. And so I think there was one educator there. Everybody else was business leaders. And they were just as engaged, they're like, oh my gosh, we need that. So the work is completely agnostic to content. I just happen to think, first of all, because my ecosystem is in education. So
right.
That's where I start.
Great place to start.
But I have gotten many comments of people like, hey, can you just come talk to our business, or can you come talk to our folks about this? Which I'm happy to do. But what I often say is, I believe school boards are really the pipeline for public servants and for public representatives. So often if you become, like, the first publicly elected position you take is at a school board.
Right.
And then if you you kind of get the bug. You get, and then you run for your city council, and then you run for, maybe something else, and then you run for your state representative. And there's a big pipeline starting at school boards. So I do think, going back to my roots of like, where can I be proactive about this problem?
Right.
So if we can encourage and build skills of school board members to have productive disagreement and productive conflict, then maybe we'll get better at doing that at the senior levels of our politicians, which I don't think we're doing that well at least at the federal level.
Great. Perfect. You teed me up perfectly for that. Just right now, education, very much a topic of public concern. It always is. It's about our kids, right? We all
the
care.
Most important thing.
We care deeply about it. And maybe just talk about what's happening at the federal level and what that could mean for Colorado.
Well, I will say state education has always been a state issue. I think we're hearing a lot of discussion of like, we're going to give it back to the states. Well, it already has been a state issue, but that's not to say the federal government does not impact our state. So for Colorado, for example, it varies every year, but I think approximately we get about 10% of our funds from the federal Department of Education. So when I see the discussions about the federal department being possibly shuttered or, the services moved to other agencies, it does concern me because the role of the federal government, at least in the past, and I'm open to debate, I'm open to discussion, but in the past, it has been to put guardrails on to serve our most vulnerable students. So the federal government puts a lot of dollars into our special education students. Not enough dollars, like none of us are fully funded on that. But like between the feds and the state, we have some supports and then locals have to pick up the rest. And it's always underfunded. So I am concerned about what even a little bit of funding being removed from that, those are our most vulnerable students. So I do have concerns about that. And then the title funds that come from the Federal Department of Education, those help states bolster resources for schools and students that have higher percentages of students in poverty. And so the schools and districts get extra resources to be able to support those students. So right now, the debate that's happening, and I try to model and practice what I preach. So I try not to freak out until I know, what the facts are. But the things I'm watching for are if those services get moved into other sectors of the federal government, are they still delivered well? Is the amount of money still the same? Do we have compliance and guardrails around how that money is spent? And so those are the things I worry about. And it will impact Colorado, and it will impact all the other states. I'm fine to have a discussion about what the appropriate role is for the federal government and then how states would have to react to that. But I am concerned about the speed and the haphazardness that it seems that this is happening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for that answer. Yeah, interesting times. And I think no matter where you come from, thinking about leadership, it's how do you continue to practice some of these skills, because it will require deep listening and compromise and all these things that you're thinking about. And maybe that's a good way to, as we're kind of wrapping up the regular questions, and we'll go to the lightning round here in a second. I am curious. You're an experienced leader, and in issues that can be polarizing, can be challenging, and in some ways are closest to our heart when you think about that they are related to our children.
Yeah.
So, Katy, taking it to like the super personal level, how do you take care of yourself relative to just making sure that you have the resiliency to continue to engage when things get difficult?
Yeah. Well, that is a hard thing. And I actually think a lot of leaders are struggling with that right now. Mm-hmm. And it was, in the end, one of the reasons why I knew it was time for me to step down. Because after 7 years and the last 3 being through COVID,
yes,
I knew my health was actually being compromised, and there were signs of that. And so I was like, it's time for someone else to lead, someone else with energy, and it's time for me to take care of myself a little bit. But so I did do that. I made that decision, that hard decision to step down. But I think it's really important that you have a team of folks that you surround yourself with that you can be super authentic with. So if that's like crying with them about there's so much uncertainty, I don't know how to lead in this time, I like doing that with them, to saying, hey, I'm struggling with my optimism right now. Like, let's brainstorm some ways we can be optimistic. Where I start to lose hope as a leader is if I have no optimism. So I'm constantly trying to be like, where's the silver lining? What can we build on? Where's the little nugget of hope in this moment? What can we build on from that? So that helped my resilience. And I used to say, because people would always tell me, well, go draw a bath and have a glass of wine and do this. And I'm like, yeah, but that's I was like, I can't wellness my way out of this.
Right.
There has to be some systemic things like getting sleep, doing exercise, trying to eat well. And that gives you a baseline. But there are going to be times where you're burned out and you need that team around you. And then sometimes, I think leaders have to know when the best time is to exit. If they are depleted and their lack of energy, because I didn't think it was fair for Colorado to have a low energy. At the time, I was kind of like, I'm so tired that my answer to everything was no. No, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, this is not fair. We need somebody with a little more energy and a little more ambition to take things on. But I was just so tired. I didn't have it toward the end.
Yeah.
So, those are some of the pieces. But I think wellness and taking care of yourself has to be systemic, and you have to cultivate a team around you that you can be really authentic with and, share your struggles.
That's great advice. And I also hear in your answer, just you've given everybody permission to be human.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that, and we believe that leadership is a activity and it's a choice and you have to practice it and it's about progress, but it's also difficult.
Yeah.
And so
we used to talk at my senior team level at CDE. We used to use a lot of tap in and tap out language.
Oh, okay.
I got to tap out today. Like it's too much for me right now. And then somebody else would say, I'll tap in for you because it really is a team. And that having that camaraderie and that level of trust with your team
it's great.
Is really important.
Love that. Love that. Wonderful. Well, let's move to the lightning round. Katy, what is your favorite Colorado hobby?
It has to be hiking and dog hiking. Yeah.
Like hiking with a dog?
Hiking with a dog or dog park walking. I was like, I should create a new verb. Dog parking. Dog parking. Because one of my wellness pieces is my dog.
Yes,
so
mine too.
So she's a very energetic border collie. So taking her out,
great.
Running around.
Yeah, shout out to my wiener dog, Ike. I don't know what I do without him. He's good. He always loves me.
Mental health.
When I need to tap out.
Very authentic.
Yeah, Ike's got me. All right. Favorite Colorado landmark?
NCAR.
Ooh,
the National Center for
Do
Atmospheric
say
Research.
more. I know you went to school right by that top of
but my father actually was the was the director of NCAR, president of UCAR, which oversees all that. So just a lot of my kind of lifetime experiences. My best friend got married at NCAR because we were able to do that. And so I would go hiking there, and it's always that beacon on the top where the Flatirons are in the back. And you can hike and it's like a science museum there. Perfect. And you can have lunch there.
And for those who don't know, I can't believe maybe someone wouldn't, but what is NCAR?
It's the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And I.M. Pei, a very famous architect, built and designed. He didn't build, he designed that building. And so it's right there beneath the Flatirons in Boulder. And it's kind of a iconic view and picture that speaks Boulder.
It totally does. That is a great note to audience. Check that out sometime if you haven't been there. That's a great answer.
Tons of great stuff for kids there too, like fun little experiments you can do with weather in the lobby, and they do tours, and it really gets people engaged in science.
I love that, and spoken like a true educator. I love that. Okay, Katy, what action hero do you most identify with?
This I had to do a little research on because I'm not really an action hero person, but Elastigirl.
Oh, I like that.
Okay.
From one of the Incredibles, of course. Yes.
And, the description of that is like they were living their mundane life as the Incredibles, and then they had to go save the world.
Right.
And Elastigirl, stretching and moving and maneuvering into the current environment. I lead a pretty lovely, happy, mundane life, and there's things that we need to do to save the world.
Oh, that is a fantastic metaphor. And certainly that does describe you and how I've seen you show up in this community. Wow, that's a great answer. Great answer. Okay, final question. What are you currently binging? Is there a show or a book or a podcast maybe that you're drawing inspiration from, or maybe it's wasting your time?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not a big binger, but I will say my husband and I just finished watching Only Murders in the Building.
Mine husband and I too.
And that was fun.
It's a great show.
And it was fun. And I think in this moment, going back to the mundane and we have to save the world, to replenish yourself, sometimes you have to go to the mundane, something that's like totally not related to your world, not related to anything you do, not watching the news. And so that's what I was doing.
That's a good one. Yeah. Good. I'm glad you shared that. Well, thank you. As always, so much fun to visit with you and learn from you and be on the journey with you. Thank you, Katy.
And thank you for your leadership and your support of everything I've ever done in terms of being commissioner, but also kind of launching forward. You saw the need.
We're excited and proud and grateful to fund your efforts too. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining Colorado Leadership Stories, where we hope to inspire the next generation of Colorado community builders, doers, and difference makers. Colorado Leadership Stories is presented by the Boettcher Foundation. The Boettcher Foundation supports Colorado by empowering leaders and communities with tools to tackle challenges and pursue opportunities, building a better state for everyone. With an 85-plus year legacy of giving back, we're committed to amplifying our impact for future generations. That's the spirit of Boettcher.